Disaster was as close as the press of a red button. 4 Russian submarines patrolled the Florida coast. U.S. warships had dropped depth charges. The Russian captain was stressed, trigger-happy, and ready to wreak havoc. Each sub was armed with a nuclear warhead. Each warhead had the potential to repeat a Hiroshima-level calamity. Had it not been for the contagious calm of a clear-thinking officer, World War III might have begun in 1962. His name was Vasily Arkhipov. He was the 36-year-old chief of staff for a clandestine fleet of submarine subs. The crew members assumed they were being sent on a training mission off the Siberian coast. They came to learn that they had been commissioned to travel 5,000 miles to the southwest to set up a spearhead for a base near Havana, Cuba. The subs went south, and so did their mission. To move quickly, the submarines traveled on the surface of the water, where they ran head-on into Hurricane Daisy. The 50-foot waves left the men nauseated and the operating system compromised. Then came the warm waters of the Atlantic. Soviet subs were designed for the polar waters, not the tropical Atlantic. Temperatures inside the subs exceeded 120 degrees. The crews battled the heat and claustrophobia for much of the 3-week journey. By the time they were near the coast of Cuba, the men were exhausted, on edge, and full of anxiety. The situation worsened when the subs received cryptic instructions from Moscow to turn northward and patrol the coastline of Florida. Soon after they entered the American waters, their radar picked up the signal of a dozen ships and aircrafts. The Russians were being followed by the Americans. The U.S. ships set off depth charges. The Russians assumed they were under attack. During the chaos, the captain lost his cool. He summoned his staff to his command post to share this message. We're going to blast them now. We will die, but we will sink them all. We will not disgrace our Navy. The world was teetering on the verge of war and didn't even know it. But then Vasily Arkhipov asked for a moment with his captain. The 2 men stepped to the side. He urged his superior to reconsider. He suggested they talk to the Americans before reacting. The captain, he listened. His anger cooled, and he gave the order for the vessels to surface. The Americans encircled the Russians and kept them under surveillance. What the Russians intended to do is still unclear to this day. But this incredible brush with death was kept secret for decades. Arkhipov, he deserved a medal, yet he lived the rest of his life with no recognition. He was the one that caused all of those subs to go back to Russia without firing any weapons. It wasn't until 2002 that the public learned of the barely avoided catastrophe. As the director of the National Security Archive states, this lesson from this event is that a guy named Vasily stayed calm and saved the world. This is an important study that can benefit our individual lives. You'll probably not spend 3 weeks in a sweltering sub, but you may spend a semester carrying a heavy class load, or you may fight the headwinds of a tough recession. You may spend night after night at the bedside of a sick child or parent. You may fight to keep a family together, a business afloat, a teen from going astray. In these moments, you will be tempted to press the red button and release not nuclear warheads, but angry outbursts, a rash of accusations, a fiery retaliation of hurtful words. Unchecked anxiety unleashes an atomic bomb of destruction. How many people have been wounded because of unbridled stress? And how many disasters have been averted because one person stayed calm? It is this composure that Paul is summoning in the first of a triad of proclamations. And as we sit here today on Father's Day, my advice to fathers, my encouragement to you is stay calm. You got a tough assignment, a big responsibility that God has placed in your hands. Not everything depends on you, as we'll see in our lesson today. It'll be a tough assignment. It's tough raising kids. It's challenging being a faithful spouse, but not everything depends on you. And in those moments where times are tough, when you're raising teenagers, when you're trying to bring up a family to know God, stay calm. Stay calm and trust God. In Philippians 4, Paul writes, "Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything." The Greek word translated here as gentleness describes a temperament that is seasoned and mature. It envisions an attitude that is fitting to the occasion, level-headed, temperate. This gentle reaction is one of steadiness, even-handedness, fairness. It looks humanely and reasonable at the facts of a case. Its opposite would be overreaction, a sense of panic. And we see that this type of demeanor, this type of gentleness, it's evident to everybody. Family members notice, your friends see a difference, co-workers benefit from it. Others may freak out or run out, but the gentle person is sober-minded and clear-thinking. This person is contagiously calm, and the contagiously calm person reminds others that God is in control. How many people do we read about in the Bible who were placed in dire situations, who had fires leaping all around them? We think about individuals who were in tough predicaments as they were serving God. We go back to the Old Testament. We think of Noah. We think of Daniel. We think of Esther. People whose lives were on the line as they were striving to follow God. And there are so many examples of people who were calm in the midst of fire. And because of their calmness, they saved a lot of people. Think about David on the battlefield when he went out to take on Goliath. A sense of calm. We think of Esther when she went and stood before the king to intervene, saving her people, saving the Jewish nation. In a very tense situation, we have every appearance of calmness. What about the Apostle Paul, the one who's writing this letter? He is in a prison cell at this very moment as he is writing from Rome, and he talks about being gentle, about having a calmness of spirit. And the people who do this, whether we think of Daniel, we think of David, we look at Esther, we think about Paul, what about Jesus leading up to Calvary? All of these people remind us through their actions, through their attitude, that God is in control. Remember what I said, dads, it all doesn't depend on you. If it all depended on me, if it all depended on our strength, we would fail. We would fail as parents, we would fail as husbands. God is in control. And we have somebody on our side who's way more powerful, way more strong, way more smart than we are. This is the executive who tells the company, let's do our part. We're going to be okay. This is the leader who sees the challenge, acknowledges the challenge, and observes these are tough times, but we can make it through. How can we remain gentle in the midst of chaos? How can we stay calm when things around us seem to be spinning out of control? How can we keep our hands away from that red trigger? How can we keep our heads when everybody else is losing theirs? Well, we have to explore the depths of this next phrase. Let your gentleness be evident to all. Now here's the key phrase. The Lord is near. You look at what precedes and what follows this statement. It's a big statement. The Lord is near. Because of the Lord's presence, we can be gentle. Because of the Lord's presence, we can live a life that's contrary to what we see modeled in this world. Because the Lord is near, we know we have an asset on our side, somebody that we can turn to even when we may not have the answers ourselves. It's the Lord's presence that allows us to be calm, that allows us to be gentle, that allows us to keep our heads and not just fire off in anger when something doesn't go the way we want it to. And it's also the Lord's presence that allows us to not be filled with anxiety. The Lord is near. What a powerful reminder that we're not alone, that it all doesn't depend on us, it all doesn't depend on me. Jesus, he bore the sins of the world. Jesus did something that only he could do. He provided salvation for me, he provided salvation for everybody. This is the one who is near. The Lord is near, the one who died for us, the one who gave up everything for us. His presence is available to us. If you look at the 7 sayings of our Savior from the cross, and you listen to what he says as he hangs there in agony, it's amazing the level of calmness, the level of gentleness Jesus had right here at the end. In the most agonizing of situations, the most unfair of situations, our Savior, he was calm. It's a powerful reminder that we're not alone. You may feel alone at times. You may feel alone as you're trying to raise up teenagers. You may feel alone as a new parent when you're taking care of your babies. You may think you're alone, but you're not. There is never a moment in which you face life without help. One of the sayings that I say often in my house is I'll say to Shannon, "Hey, Shan, I need help." She hates that phrase. She hates it. But as I've gotten older, I'm not afraid to admit when I need help. And we have help available to us that's beyond anything we can ever imagine. There's never a moment in life, there's never anything that you'll face when you're alone. Help is always available. God is near, and God repeatedly pledges his presence to his people. To Abram, God said, "Do not be afraid. I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward." To Hagar, the angel announced, "Do not be afraid. God has heard." When Isaac was expelled from the land by the Philistines and forced to move from place to place, God appeared to him and reminded him, "Do not be afraid, for I am with you." After Moses' death, God told Joshua, "Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." God was with David in spite of his sin, with Jacob despite his conniving, with Elijah despite his lack of faith. In the extreme declaration of communion, God himself, Emmanuel, called himself Emmanuel, which means God with us. God became flesh, he became sin, he defeated the grave, and he is still with us in this very moment. And through the Spirit, he comforts, he teaches, he convicts. Do not assume that God is watching from a distance. Avoid the quicksand that bears the marker, "God has left you." Don't listen to that lie, because we don't have to face anything alone. The Lord is with me, I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? And because of God's presence, we can be anxious for nothing. And this is Paul's point. This is why he's writing this letter, as he's encouraging these Christians here at Philippi. And remember that truth. He is writing a letter. He did not use chapter and verse numbers. The apostle intended the words of verse 5 and verse 6 to be read all together in one fell swoop. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything. The Lord is near. Have no worry. The Lord is near. Do not be fretful. We can calmly take our concerns to God because he is as near as our next breath. This was a lesson he had to teach his apostles. This was something Jesus had to make clear to these men before he left earth. And we look at the miracle that Jesus performs in John chapter 6, the miracle of the bread and fish. In an event crafted to speak to the anxious heart, Jesus, he tells his disciples to do the impossible. Feed 5,000 people. Therefore Jesus, lifting up his eyes and seeing that a large crowd was coming to him, said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that these may eat?" This he was saying to test him, for he himself knew what he was intending to do. When John described this gathering as a large crowd, he was serious. There were 5,000 men plus women and children. And Jesus, he was going to feed this entire crowd. He was going to feed all of these people. The disciples, on the other hand, do you remember what they wanted to do? They wanted to send everybody away. They wanted to get rid of this crowd. They wanted them to be dismissed so that they could all go get food for themselves. You look at Matthew in his account, when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This place is desolate, and the hour is already late, so send the crowds away that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." Do you notice what the apostles do as they come to Jesus? The apostles, they come to Jesus and they tell him what to do. Do you see that? It's evening time. The disciples, they come to Jesus, and immediately they issue a command. Send the crowds away. Let them go fend for themselves. Do you detect any anxiety in their words? They don't call Jesus master. They don't come with a suggestion. They don't call him teacher or Lord. They march as a group in unison to Jesus, and they tell him what to do. I believe they were fearful of what might happen. Do you remember the Snickers commercials about being hungry? Imagine 5,000 hungry men, plus 5,000 maybe women and children who were hungry. They had every reason to feel unsettled. But then again, now think about this. Think about the apostles. Did they not have equal reason to feel at peace? Right here in this moment, in this situation, and this is what I want you to think about. This is real life. They had been with Jesus. They had witnessed things. How did they respond to this problem? Did they respond to this problem with peace, with calm, or were they filled with anxiety and worry? Based on what we see here, here's a problem that comes up. They go up to Jesus and they tell him what to do. I think they're motivated by anxiety, worrying about what might potentially happen if these people don't get food. By this point in their experience with Jesus, now I want you to think about everything that they had seen. We're here in Matthew chapter 14. Think about everything that's happened previously to this. Jesus had healed leprosy. He had healed the centurion servant. He had healed Peter's mother-in-law, one of their own family members. He had calmed a violent sea. He had healed a paralytic. He had healed a woman who had been sick for 12 years. He had raised a girl from the dead. He had driven out an evil spirit, healed a demon-possessed man in a cemetery, turned water into wine, healed a man who had been an invalid for 38 years. He had done all of this. And prior to what happens here in Matthew 14, the apostles had seen all of it. Did any of the disciples pause long enough to think, well, you know, Jesus has healed the sick. Jesus has raised the dead back to life. Jesus has calmed the angry waves of a storm that was out of control. I wonder if he'll have a solution here. I wonder what this man can do right here with this problem. After all, he's standing right here in front of us. Why don't we go ask him? Why didn't it occur to anyone here in John 6 to ask Jesus for help? Why doesn't it occur to us to ask Jesus for help? Struggling as a parent? Won't you get God involved? Struggling in your marriage? How about getting God involved? You're struggling with life, direction, purpose. Why not go back to your Creator, the one who made you, and see what He has in store for you? We know what happens. Finally, a boy offered his lunch basket to Andrew, who mentioned it finally to Jesus. And we look at this story. This is amazing. Not one coin was spent to pay for this meal. They started the day with 200 coins. They ended the day with 200 coins. In addition, they filled 12 baskets with leftover food, a souvenir for each apostle. Now, you aren't facing 5,000 hungry people. None of us are. But maybe you are facing a deadline in 2 days, a loved one in need of a cure, child who is struggling at school, a spouse intertwined in temptation. On one hand, you have a problem. On the other, you have an unlimited quantity of wisdom, energy, patience, and time available to you in Christ. But we look at our own resources, and everything that we have is limited. Our wisdom is limited. Our energy is limited. Our patience, our time is limited. And it seems overwhelming. And anxiety is the result. And I come back to this question, the question that I have for the apostles, the question that I have for myself, for all of us: why don't we ask Jesus for help? This time, instead of starting with what you have, start with Jesus. Start with His wealth. Start with His resources. Start with His strength. Before you open a ledger, open your heart. Before you count coins or count heads, count the number of times that Jesus has helped you. Before you lash out in fear, look up in faith. Take a moment and ask Jesus for help. He's available. The Lord is near. And our gentleness, it'll result because of the Lord's presence. And because the Lord is with us, because the Lord is near, we don't have to be filled with anxiety about every concern of life. We don't have to bounce from one anxious thought to another because we know the Lord is near. It really could be as simple as this. Moms, dads, how about asking Jesus for help? This morning, if we can help you in any way, I want you to know the Lord is near. Whatever you're fighting, whatever you're struggling with, whatever you're battling, individual or within your family, the Lord is near. And He's available to you right now. If we can help you in any way, we invite you to come as we stand and sing together.